To call Spike Lee's 1989 film Do the Right Thing one of the most successful and painful portrayals of racial and moral conflict in just over the past 3 decades of American culture is to do it a disservice. Do the Right Thing would be notable enough merely by virtue of its historical significance and Spike Lee's technical mastery of both filmmaking and screenwriting, but it also bears the unfortunate burden of being just as relevant, its dialogue on rioting just as invidious today as it was 31 years ago. In a recent Criterion retrospective, Sean Keeley remarks on Spike Lee's claim that over the years, many white viewers, but no black ones, have approached him to ask why Mookie, portrayed by Spike Lee, initiated the looting of Sal's by throwing the trash can, and whether he did the right thing. This explosive moment, which Keeley suggests is one of rage, is the most divisive of the film, and one that some critics claim is where the film takes a side on the moral debate it instigates, one between Dr. King and Malcolm X, violence or nonviolence. In this essay, I suggest that deeper understanding of this moment can be found by putting it in context with the climax of another film from the 80s, Nagisa Oshima's Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, and that these moments urge us to move beyond reductive dichotomous moral frameworks towards a self-imposed system of morality. Putting Lee's and Oshima's films in conversation is, to my knowledge, an as-of-yet unexplored connection. While Do the Right Thing is experiencing a critical renaissance of sorts, sadly in part due to its sustained relevance in the wake of police killings like those of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence is a film many would describe as overlooked. At first glance, the two films have little in common from a presentational standpoint. Do the Right Thing is quick, stylish, and dialogue-heavy, whereas Mr. Lawrence is slow, ponderous, and quiet, even as its characters bicker. However, the structural parallels are significant. Both take place in enclosed communities. In the former, the majority African-American Brooklyn neighborhood of Bedford-Stuyvesant. In the latter, a Japanese prisoner of war camp during the Second World War. Both of these communities are policed by an occupying force which attempts to maintain a fragile stability with their inhabitants. By the climax of each film, this stability has been destroyed due to the actions of both involved parties, which gradually escalate until they reach an uncontrollable boiling point. The aforementioned explosive incidents. Both of these incidents can be traced back to specific moments much earlier in their respective films, results of an inevitable domino effect. When Buggin' Out, Radio Raheem, and Smiley demand that pizzeria owner Sal add portraits of African Americans to his wall of fame, a slippery slope of the stemming confrontations leads to Radio Raheem being killed by a police chokehold outside the restaurant, and the following riot that destroys Sal's business.
He just wasn't right for me. He wasn't compassionate. I need passion in my life.
I would say he's a Mama Lou.
He's a Mama Lou? Yeah, right.
Yo, Mook!
A couple of words of time working
Okay.
Mookie!
So you know I'm still...
What?
Come here, no brothers up on the wall.
Man, ask Sal, right?
Hey, Sal, how come you got no brothers up on the wall here?
You want brothers on the wall? Get your own place. You can do what you want to do.
Similarly, Captain Unoy's insistence that the ranking Allied officer Hixley give up all British soldiers capable of weapons manufacturing in order to aid the Japanese army leads to Unoy's desire to replace him with David Bowie's Major Jack Selliers, who eventually stands up to him at the end of the film, leading to his brutal execution by exposure.
Now from you, I want the names of all prisoners who are informed on the subject of armaments and ammunition. Who are the experts here?
I am not required under international law to furnish the enemy with any
This is not
information.
North Africa. We are not Germans. There's no Geneva Convention here. If you do not follow my orders, I will have to replace you.
Neither of these incidents can be viewed in isolation. Their explosiveness is a release of all the emotional tension which is suppressed in both communities throughout the films, and are inevitable consequences of an occupying oppressive force existing within a community.
やっぱりイギリス人は全員鎌か。バカな。私はあなたの助けがいる。日本軍人は敵に助けを求めたりしない。おい、お前は鎌か。Yeah. He says you're homosexual. Are you?
No, sir, I am not.
違うって言ってる。お前らオカマが怖いんだろ。侍はオカマだと怖くはない。戦争は男の友情を強める。しかし、全ての兵士がオカマになるわけじゃない。
It is important to note that part of the reason why Mr. Lawrence has not been effectively canonized is likely due to its grappling with homosexuality within the military. The homosexual and interracial kiss between Bowie and Sakamoto, which leads to the former's execution, was transgressive for its time. However, the theming is consistent throughout Oshima's body of work. In an interview about his final film, Taboo, he clarifies, "I didn't make Taboo as a historical film. For me, there is no difference whatsoever with this or another genre film." The focus, then, is on the continuity of the emergence of homosexuality within traditionally masculine contexts, but also its inability to be contained even by oppressive occupying forces. When Sellers kisses Yunoi, it is simultaneously an effective solution to an immediate predicament and a release of an oppressed emotion, in this case, brotherly love, which has transmuted into homoerotic feelings in a masculine environment dominated by violence. The incident in Do the Right Thing is, too, about brotherly love, specifically about putting some brothers up on Sal's wall. The citizens of Bed-Stuy feel they cannot claim ownership of their community, in part due to the presence of the police, but also because they are not represented in Sal's, despite his presence in their community. Both incidents result then because of a need for understanding between two conflicting parties that are unable to effectively reconcile. Despite the desire for understanding, both these films are unavoidably about conflict, the failure to understand. Mookie's hurling of the trash can into the window of Sal's famous and Sellers' kissing of Captain Yunoi are controversial because they are actions that are deemed unacceptable within the social context of their communities, and the result of both characters being forced to make impossible choices. For Sellers to intervene is to choose his own death, but for him to do nothing is to accept the suffering of his comrades and the aiding of the enemy. Bartley writes in an essay on Do the Right Thing that Mookie simultaneously must and must not throw the trash can. He must because justice under the circumstances requires it. There are no other images available. The police are gone. They have evacuated. The actions of both characters are necessary and inevitable, yet wholly unacceptable according to the social contract of their communities, as defined by their occupying forces. The issue, then, is the social contract itself, which has been broken by the executions of Radio Rahim and Major Jack Sellers. According to Lindroth, the events of the movie suggest that, in the modern world, it may no longer be possible to make the right choice, no longer possible to recognize the right thing. These explosive moments, therefore, suggest a rejection of the social contract of these frailly upheld armistices and the false dichotomies that they represent. Both films do present dyadic dialogues. In Do the Right Thing, one between Malcolm and Dr. King, in Mr. Lawrence, between Eastern and Western tradition. But simply presenting these conflicts as a choice between two options is destructive, creating the expectation of its protagonists that they must make a choice that conforms to systems imposed upon them. When Keeley describes Lee's film as ultimately an angry one and a duel between love and hate, this clearly defined dichotomized delineation is not merely reductive, it's missing the point entirely. Mookie's hurling of the trash can and the ensuing riot are not simply acts of rage and anger against the police, they are outpourings of their repressed love for Radio Rahim and their African-American community. The moment does not choose a side in this forcibly imposed conflict, rather it transcends it, suggesting that doing the right thing is not about making a decision that aligns with a moral framework, especially not one defined by an oppressive occupying force, but about deciding for oneself the correct path to take, the correct choice to make, as an expression of self-determination.
He had a radio! He had a fucking radio! He died because